issues affecting casual staff in Irish third level education. And we did a bit of research as well on what's happening based on the questionnaire, so this is what we're going to talk about today. So, a few words just on the background, just to explain how that came about. Well, it came about, I guess, because as casual workers, we talk to each other as friends, as colleagues, and we just realized that we basically suffered from the same problems, and that we were certainly not the only ones, and that we had maybe to do a bit of research around that to actually show people that these are not individual issues, but that they're structural and affecting, not only a few people. And the context is there actually to sustain that hypothesis, because if you look at some data, you can see that, well, things are not going that well, in particular with the employment control framework that forced universities to rely on temporary staff, on casual staff, because there was a ban basically on permanent employment. And that, I don't want to suggest that there was never any casual work before that in universities. That's not the case. Casual work has always pretty much been around universities, including quite exploitative practices, and we know that. But the trend has certainly accelerated in recent years, and with the increase in staff-student ratios and decrease in funding, and all sorts of changes to practice. So if someone goes on sabbatical, they will have been replaced by someone on a 12-month contract. It's now 9 months. If you're lucky, it can also be hourly paid, for example. Lots of tasks also were redefined that affected in particular graduate workers who had been paid for essay corrections and were no longer paid or paid less. So lots of things happened. And also we have job bridge, and quite a few universities rely very heavily on job bridge, including for research positions. So in that context, we decided to do an outreach project. And originally it was not designed as a scientific exercise, but was mostly to get in touch with people, to get them talking, to find out more about what was going on. Was it the same in different departments, in different colleges? But as it happened, we got quite a few responses, and we got 227 responses in total, so there is some validity to it, definitely. And it was circulated not through universities, not through administration, because we had no access to that. We tried, we asked a few departments, would they circulate that to staff, and it did not happen. So we had to rely on social media, on a particular union actually helping us as well, circulating it. And we had a lot of responses just within the first 48 hours, which just gave us the impression that there was some urgency and that some people were really eager to talk. And some of them actually wrote that in the questionnaire, thank you for raising that issue, for giving us a chance to speak, and so on, because people don't talk about that beyond their friendships, their small circles, because there's an element of shame, there's isolation and so on, so people don't talk. Most of our respondents were casual workers, 3/4 of them, and we had a majority of female respondents as well, a lot from the arts and humanities and social sciences, which is due to our own methods of circulation as well. And the major findings are here. So casualization is gendered, so that's one aspect that came out really strongly, and it happened before austerity. So because we have people who answer the questionnaire who have been in the same situation, hourly paid on short-term contracts for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years in some cases. So it's not just in recent years. It's becoming normal, it's all over the place, and even for people who experience it, there's an element of, well, it's like that, it's as if it had always been the case, though it's not really. And there are fewer and fewer routes into secure work. So it's not a case of, well, if you work hard, if you work on hourly paid contracts for 5 years, you'll get a reward eventually. Increasingly, for many people, there's no exit, there's no permanent contract coming up after all that effort. And definitely it's also a race to the bottom in relation to pay, in relation to working conditions, which are getting worse and worse across the board. And as a result, people feel isolated, marginalized, and they're increasingly scared. And they actually are scared of bringing up those issues, of discussing the terms of their contract and so on, and scared to mobilize. and poverty, as we're going to see in a while, and hopelessness, complete hopelessness, are quite common. So I'll pass over to Theresa for a bit more detail. Thank you.
So as Aline mentioned, there were a number of different findings, major findings within the data set, but I thought, we thought that for today, it might be useful just to focus on pay, differences in pay, as it shows quite clearly a trend in terms of the number of years put in doesn't equal the remuneration. And so it's something that's systemic and something that's structural, but it also shows just how poor some of these workers actually are. So just kind of to begin there, in terms of the characteristics of pay, it's really difficult to try and get people to talk about this because for a lot of people their pay is unknown. It's unclear at the start of their work, and it's something that is continually being referred to as zero-hour contracts, which we know the UK in particular, UK universities rely more on them than the private sector does, and we've reason to believe that we're not too different here. Pay is unstandardized within departments, so I could be doing the same work as a colleague and getting paid a quarter of the rate of pay for it. Pay differs across departments and across institutions. Pay is not commensurate, as Aline suggested, with years of experience. And I think what was quite striking for us was the number of individuals who reported not making minimum wage, that they were working below minimum wage. And just to kind of, this is just a brief kind of infographic to start out with. This is kind of the profile of the typical precarious worker that came out in our study. And I keep calling it a study, and we're really kind of awkward about that. We tend to try and call it a project instead. And feel free to ask me about that after. So the typical precarious academic is female, works in arts, humanities, and social sciences, but again, that it is in part down to our own biases in how we circulated the survey. She's worked in higher education institutions for over 8 years, and she typically earns less than €10,000 a year. Now, if we kind of look at the pay in more detail here, and there are a number of different ways that I've gone about trying to break this down and trying to communicate just how large these discrepancies are. And I think that it's probably shocking to a lot of people who aren't familiar with casual work. We've done a number of interviews with student newspapers, and so students themselves are shocked by the fact that the people teaching them aren't on rather large salaries. So what I did initially is we looked at full-time permanent workers and compared them to casual workers. So casual workers includes people who are on an hourly paid basis or a 9-month, 1-year contract, people who are doing pro rata work, and we also include PhD students in the broader category of casual work as well. And 46% of those who participated in our study who were doing casual work, reported a salary of less than $10,000 a year. And of course, that, as you might expect, that's kind of weighted the opposite direction for those who are in permanent positions, where 64% reported earning a salary of over $70,000 a year. And just to kind of show you even a greater sense of how stark that is, those who are doing hourly paid work, 77% of those were concentrated in the under €10,000 bracket. And this graph that I have put up here It looks at, it breaks down a comparison. What I've done is I've gone through kind of different, shall we say, benchmarks to kind of give you some type of idea in the differences in earnings in the different categories of work. So 63% of those who are permanent are earning, 64% who are permanent are earning over 70k and over. Those who are doing full-time temporary work, so again, that's someone who has a contract, proper contract, 9-month contract or 5-year contract. They're earning between 31 and 70k. 63% of them are earning between 31 and 70k. But I should flag to you here that, as you might expect, they're generally weighted towards the 30, 35, 40 end of the spectrum. It was just because the way in which we tried to measure income was really problematic, because the way people report income is really all over the shop, and that's because how they're paid is all over the shop. So to try and categorize this was a feat in and of itself. And then as we move down that hierarchy, we see things get even worse, right? So hourly paid workers, 85% of them are earning less, 15k or less. Mixed casual, so that's people who are doing a combination of either hourly paid and pro rata work, or we have one person who reported being a permanent 0 hours contract person. People who are permanent part-time, so we're still casual. And then pro rata, we see 59% are earning 20k or less, and then other casual, and that's predominantly PhD students who are presumed not to be workers, but we actually consider them to be workers, and we include them in part of the work that we do, because the presumption is if they're studying, they're not looking for work. But for many of the people who participate in third-level workplace selection, participate in the study, they need full-time work in order to sustain themselves as well. Right. So I suppose another thing that's important to point out is that several of the respondents indicated that they were working in various institutions over the course of their career, but also across various institutions in one academic year in order to be able to sustain themselves. So many were juggling hourly paid work between several universities, and some supplemented their work with social welfare payments. And while work like pro rata work and hourly paid work is considered part-time work, it actually isn't in fact. These are the ways in which most people who are casual workers within academia try to eke out some full-time type of status. One male respondent reported working in shifts in a factory in order to support his family, in spite of being a fully qualified academic for 14 years, having 14 years experience in the sector. Which brings us on to the next slide that we have up there. Because, of course, you might be tempted to assume that there's a correlation, a really strong correlation between the number of years you work in the sector and the pay that you earn. And this just shows that people who are well kind of beyond even junior academic status are still stuck in precarious casual work, with those doing mixed casual work being stuck in the sector for 10 years on average. Those doing full-time temporary work stuck here for 7.8 years. And pro rata, so people getting paid per course, doing this stuff for 8 years as well. So that shows us that precarity is something that is I think normalized is the case that we're trying to make of that as well. And many fluctuate in and out of employment, drawing on social welfare benefits, as I've already mentioned, relying on the support of others. In a way, because of the move away from, say, 1-year, 2-year, 3-year contracts into 9-month sabbatical replacements or hourly paid work, what has happened is casual academics have, in a way, become seasonal workers. So when the teaching term is up, they're unemployed. And the conditions vary between the types of contracts as well in terms of the access to resources that workers may or may not have. And this, I suppose, gets us into what we've called the hamster wheel of precarity. That's our little symbol that we've used from here, from kind of since the beginning, really, because what has happened is, while there's this assumption that casual work is something that everybody has to do before they get the permanent job, our work indicates that this is actually not the case, that it has become increasingly more difficult to get off of that hamster wheel. There are no exit points into permanent, secure work. New and increased teaching loads on a yearly basis for contract casual workers make it much more difficult to develop a research profile, and that further marginalizes them out of academic life. Contracts are being redrawn so that research work is specifically being taken out of contracts, so you're expected to do that on your own time. And what that means is that you don't get access to conference funds or financial supports to be an active researcher. You might not even get access to journals to do research. So that further marginalizes the casual academic, and it puts them on that hamster wheel, which is the visual image that we're trying to kind of convey there, where they're chasing the permanent job, but there's no way to actually get it because the work that they're doing to try and get that permanent job is getting them no further ahead. And as a result, we see a lot of people have conveyed a sense of fear and insecurity tied in very much to their poverty, and their particular living conditions. And people are becoming grateful if they get a 9-month contract, because the struggle is now about keeping food on the table, or about earning more than they are earning on job seekers. And these are things that are very, and Aline is going to take up here, but these are things that people don't want to talk about, they don't want to admit, in a sector where which is being characterized as a sector that's fairly privileged to admit to being poor and drawing on social welfare in order to survive is not something that people want to readily admit to.
Okay, so this is drawn from the responses to the questionnaire. So we had some open-ended questions. We're asking people how they felt about their present situations and how they felt about their future prospects, and this is what came out. So as you can tell, it's not very good. A few people actually said they were relatively pleased, quite happy, things like that, but they tended to be either graduate workers or PhD students just beginning, and to work in the university sector, or in some cases people who had just secured their first, full-time 1-year or 2-year contracts and things like that. But obviously, and I mean that's quite clear, but the more time people spent in the sector, the more disillusioned, depressed, and worried they got, and so on. And some people expressed really strong feelings of feeling completely marginalized, of having failed their lives, of having wasted 10 years of their lives doing a PhD and working for peanuts, and having let go of the possibility of having a family, of buying a house and all those things that they saw people from their cohort who hadn't got into academia actually achieved, and they hadn't achieved it. So, and of course poverty came up time and time again, not so much in the section, but it did all the time. And people who spoke about insomnia, or people who spoke about just literally not knowing how to pay their bills, or feeling like a burden on their families. And these would be people in their 40s and more, who work relentlessly. They'd be working 60, 80 hours a week or more and getting absolutely no reward. Feeling also quite badly treated by the university, but also by their permanent colleagues. That came up quite a lot. people feeling at best, they're not aware, they don't care, or well, they just exploit us, they use us to do their donkey work. And that came up a few times. So very gloomy, very, I suppose, yes, very scary in many ways, but if you look at what precarious people earn and what their actual working conditions are, you can get an idea of why they feel that way. And that's what we want to say. It's not just, privileged, elite people who complain because they're not getting as much as the permanent person they work with. It's not that, if you like. They have real, concrete reasons to feel like this. So that's what we argue based on our findings. So, what we would like, or our demands based on that, based on the work we've done so far, and we really think that precarious workers, all workers anyway in the third level sector or elsewhere, should get a living wage, should get some job security and dignity, okay? And things like the 9-month contracts or the 0-hour contracts, hourly paid work, that should go, because that's completely unfair. It means you have two people carrying the same amount of work, and one is getting paid 100 times less than the other in some cases. That's the reality. So that really shouldn't exist. Not to mention all the pressures that those people suffer as well if they want to. They're not paid to talking to students. They're not paid or not paid much to actually really engage with correcting essays, supporting students. They don't have the time physically if they're running from one college to the other. So that makes it really, really difficult as well to support students, which should be the core mission there. And some transparency and some standardization in the rates of pay for temporary workers, because we have people doing the same work under the same status but not paid the same. And that's, again, we don't have the time to talk about that, but that's clearly gendered as well. Women get paid less across the board, and you have much more women in casual work as well. And create some sort of way so that temporary workers actually are brought into existing pay scales so that they're paid fairly, and not, as I said, 10, 20 or 100 times less than people who carry out the same work. So that would be it for us. Thank you very much.